want to welcome everybody to our last study together. I want to welcome everybody here who is online. Let's open with a word of prayer. Holy God, I want to give you praise and thanks for your goodness and mercy. Please guide and direct us in this final study for this camp. We approach your throne of grace with thanks and ask that you would help us to have a clearer understanding of the times in which we're living. Amen. So I have a question. We have now passed the Sunday law waymark. So what would be the theme of the new dispensation? In parentheses, for example, our increase of knowledge. Actually, I shouldn't say as an example. It would be our increase of knowledge. What is the increase of knowledge for this dispensation? So this is a bit of an experiment. After the close of the last meeting, which was number 4, we had a group discussion, which is normal. Just give me one moment. So, in presentation number 4, we ended with the comment or statement that I made about Revelation 17. Spoke about the beast and the woman. I've given I think a pretty good definition of what the woman is. An entity or something that has ideas. We haven't really discussed or spoken about the beast. So, at the end of study number 3, you'll remember that when I say you'll remember, there was a discussion that happened which I mentioned at the beginning of number 4. And this is the board work for study 4. And this, the top line is my version of what Elder Tabo had mentioned during the break. And this graphic is meant to answer a question or the question. So there's an unsealing, an increase of knowledge on that message, formalization of that message, and then a test that brings you to the shut door. And in quotation marks, this is a paraphrase of what Tabo had said. We always believed that this message, the one that's at the unsealing, was salvational. So I want us to remember that pattern or that line of progression. Then I said I've moved from one question to two questions. Question number 2, is it salvational to know if you're in the dispensation or if you're not in the dispensation? To answer that question, Pedro suggested Zechariah 10:1. We went through Zechariah 10:1, and I'm going to say the conclusion that we came to was that when you're in the dispensation, which means you need to know you're in it, you need to pray to God about what you want God to do in that dispensation. If you don't ask, you don't receive. If you don't receive, you die. Or the plant dies. So Zechariah chapter 10 is a story or a model of agriculture. So it's not the person who's praying that dies, it's their crop. They'll die because the rain won't come and they'll just dry up and shrivel away. So I'm hoping everybody understands that spiritual model that's given there with respect to the question of salvation. Please put your hand up if what I'm saying you either don't agree with or you don't understand or needs clarification. So if question number 2, the answer to it is yes, which I'll put as a tick. The question is it salvational? Tick means yes. To know. Then when you get to question 1, which was my original question, I would suggest the answer would be the same. That it is salvational. So we're going to deal with a couple of things. That it is a salvational issue to know the start of the Sunday law. And I want us to remember this pattern, which you should know by heart, really. Don't be confused or beguiled by anything that's written there. There's no hidden meaning, especially when it comes to where it says test. So for our purposes, you should be considering that the test is at the shut door. You could consider it as a period of time where it begins and ends, and I was about to quote all the tests, but I won't, because I don't like people doing that. So I won't. But I think I did in the break. So if we're okay up to that so far, we spoke about this sequence of events, and we saw that they are progressive in nature. It's the rise of the current president, the seventh kingdom, or the dragon of Revelation 13. The verse says a lamb that speaks as a dragon. And I have taught in the past that it's a lamb and then it becomes a dragon. So I've just put dragon there. But it's the lamb-like beast. Went to Testimonies to the Church, volume 5. So this is where it begins to get, maybe I'll say confusing, maybe it's not confusing to you. Maybe complicated. So, Ellen White is going to tell you, the church or the priests, that in the time of preparation, there are two experiences that the group of priests are having. I want to caution us to not think of this in parallel to Matthew 13. I don't want your mind to wander down that avenue. So this is a small hook for something that might happen in the future. Let me rephrase that. Something that might be discussed in the future. This is not a rehash of wheat and tares. Yeah. We'll take it as read. Literally. Or semi-literally, of course. There are two groups. One group is receiving the mold of the world, and one group are purifying themselves, or is purifying itself. So there's a worldly mold and there's a heavenly mold. They're direct quotes from that Spirit Prophecy quote. So Let's just go through that quote. So I'm just going to redo the graphic from the fourth study. There are three dispensations. We're in the time period of the preparation. And we're preparing to do a work. So if this is the time of preparation, the next one's going to be the time of work. She says, what are you doing today to prepare for the work that you're supposed to do in the future? There's two groups, good and bad. The bad group, in the time of preparation, are preparing to receive the mark of the beast. So they're not receiving it yet, but they're getting ready to. So this is going to be the dispensation of the mark of the beast. That's the bad one. She doesn't quite say it in this passage. Okay. She does. So one group is going to receive the mark of the beast, and the other one is going to receive the mark of God. She calls it the seal of God. So that's the two groups. They're supposed to be doing a work in this history. She doesn't say this bit explicitly. So we'll say that what they're going to do is cry. We would normally call it the loud cry. We might call it evangelism, sharing the message with the world. So we all understand what that work is. If you don't do that work, you'll get the mark of the beast. If you do the work, you'll get the seal of God. We jumped some steps in our logic. And I said that this waymark here is the Sunday law. And this was the close of probation. And then we know from other inspired statements that the work ends at the close of probation and there's no work. And then I call this dispensation 1, 2, and 3. So the story is given that in number 1, you're preparing to do a work. So you need to get ready to do that in this history. This is the start, and this is the end. And so the question that I asked at the close of that study when are you being tested? When are you being tested? She says you, and for us, this would be the priests. You might think 144,000. So I'll ask the question rhetorically because people already responded to this. The answer is in dispensation number 1, in the time of preparation. That's when you're being tested. So your job is to go back to two passages. So I'll put this here. Your work is to check Zechariah 10:1 and Testimonies of the Church, Volume 5, page 216, paragraph 1. That's what all this board work is. There's no board work here about the Zechariah passage. And check if you agree with all that I've said thus far. Because you may not agree with that. So after I'd done that, I asked the question that's here about Revelation 17, or made the comment about Revelation 17. Okay, so then the meeting ended, then we spoke, and that's where it gets complicated. There were maybe 9, 10 of us here. Lots of people gave input and asked questions. But I want to focus on a dialogue, if I can call it that, between Shemaine, Elder Shemaine, and Jonathan. So they ended up interacting with each other like a Q&A. So this is the fruit of their study or their conversation. If you have any questions, feel free to contact them. Or me. Or me if you want to. Okay, so this is what Shemaine originally gave us. The line of the 144,000. 2001, 2019, 2021, Sunday law, close of probation, second advent. Then what she did was to say she wants to look at this dispensation. And what would we call this dispensation? This is the line of 144,000. I'm going to put, she didn't put 1989, but I'm going to put it here. Quickly, what is this dispensation? What would you call it? Shout out. Early rain. So this is the early rain dispensation that she's focused on. So this would be the ploughing, early rain, latter rain, harvest. Ploughing, former rain, latter rain, harvest. If you have a problem, put your hand up. So then she said, 2001 is the time of the end. Hopefully, okay, so I'm going to carry on, and if you don't understand, stop me. Increase of knowledge, formalization, and then she's going to she used the word test. Okay, so because she used the word test, not what Elder Tabo used, shut door. What I'm going to say is, I'm now going to quote Elder Tess and say Boston, Concord, Exeter, test. So it's in line with what Elder Tess has taught. I don't know where Shemaine got test here, if it was from that or she knew it herself. But I want to remind you, remember I said keep this in the back of your mind. Don't get confused about this test being a dispensation or a period of time. And this graphic is a very old one. Predates Elder Tessie's work by many years. And depending on the point you want to make, you can mark the test at the formalization or at the shut door. I say that so that you feel confident that you're not relying on something that Elder Tess taught solely, or some random idea that Shemaine had. It seems to me that it's well established to have that last waymark, the shut door, labeled as test. Okay, so then Shemaine's going to say, this is feminism here, and then this was radical feminism. If I misquote you, let me know. And then this would be the test of, we'll call it radical feminism. So at the beginning, there's a message that's been unsealed in 2001 on feminism. You might want to say equality. As time goes on, there's a clarification on this issue. And now you know in 2019 that the subject isn't just about equality, it's about feminism. So maybe you might say it this way. Starts with equality, and then when you get more information on the subject, an increase of knowledge, it's not just equality, it's gender equality, which is called feminism. And then it's not just feminism in a generic sense, without defining what it means. it's radical feminism. And radical doesn't mean crazy. It means someone who tries to understand the problem from its roots. So we'll go from gender, from equality to gender equality to understanding. I'm going to rephrase it, not call it equality. We're going to call it inequality. It's a message about understanding equality. Inequality. Then it goes to gender inequality. And then the formalization is to understand the root causes of this gender inequality. And then you're going to be tested on that. And that test would happen at the Sunday law. So Elder Tess has taught us previously, back here, from 18 to 19. We won't say Elder Tess, we'll say the midnight cry. So the midnight cry taught us that the great test, and the great test is what's spoken about in Testimonies of the Church Volume 5. Is the mark of the beast. So the great test is the mark of the beast, but has the beast changed? No. The mark has changed. The mark of this beast's authority has changed. It changed from Ellen White's model to a new model. It changed from Sunday sacredness, to not equality, but we'll put inequality because they're both bad. So she's told us what the great test is. She spends hundreds of hours literally explaining and detailing that change so that we're sure that this change is valid. So we remember that the great test is the mark of the beast, and it's the subject of inequality or radical feminism. So here at the Sunday law, according to this graphic that Shemaine gave to us, it indicates that you will be tested on radical feminism at the Sunday law waymark. So she stopped there, and I'm not going to be able to line this graphic, this line here, with one underneath accurately, but they should line up. Time of the end, 2001, Sunday Law, Close of Probation, and Second Advent. Then this was me. So I said 144,000. I just summarized. I said, so Shemaine is saying this is the great test. She said yes. So we got through that. And okay, so I'm going to stop there for a moment. And then Jonathan began speaking, asking questions and commenting. And so then we have a graphic that looks something like this. 1989, 9/11. We'll call it the Sunday Law, and we'll put 2024. Close of Probation, Second Advent. And according to this work that Shemaine did, 9/11 is the time of the end, is Boston, is unsealing. Time of the end, Boston, and unsealing. So if we're okay with that, then the Sunday Law would be the shut door, would be test, and the question is, what are you being tested on? So if we were to do Boston, Concord, Exeter test, then I'm going to say Jonathan suggested you're being, so I've got tested, I'm going to say tested on this, and that this is this. So now you're being tested on a message that was unsealed 9/11. Okay, and what gets unsealed here is gender equality. So now you're going to be tested on gender equality at the Sunday Law. The great test. Now, we have to be careful when we start talking about Ellen White, because Ellen White has a model of the church then the world. After the gospel's given to the church in 2 steps, the disciples, then Pentecost. Paul is raised up to give the gospel to the Gentiles. In very simple terms. And this is the message that Ellen White develops for Adventism. At the Sunday Law, the message of salvation, the everlasting gospel of Revelation 14, goes to the world. The hour of God's judgment is coming. Babylon has fallen already. And if you don't come out of Babylon, you will be destroyed. A message given by the priests to the world. Whether or not we believe that will happen or not is not part of this study. So let's put that thought aside. So we have taught, we have believed of these repeating patterns. Boston, Concord, Exeter, test. Unsealing, or time at the end, I'll call it unsealing. Increase of knowledge, formalization, shut door, test. So we're familiar with that pattern, and what we've taught is that this pattern repeats. So if we repeat it, we have Boston, Concord, Exeter, test. So Jonathan suggested or asked, the Sunday law is two waymarks. It's a test and it's Boston. And the characteristics of Boston is what? Is it a test or is it an unsealing? Unsealing. So there is an unsealing because it's Boston. It's no longer a test. It's Boston. It's not a shut door. It's an unsealing. So if the message of gender equality was unsealed, is that 13 years ago? Yep. Tell me if it's not 13. The message of equality was unsealed 13 years ago. So it can't be unsealed now. Whatever's happening at the Sunday law, it's not an unsealing or an unpackaging or a message on gender equality. So kind of let that sink in and see if you agree or disagree with that. (2001) is an unsealing of gender equality. So the sentence would read, an unsealing of gender equality. And you can clearly see we're going to get a repeating pattern now. We're at the time of the end. That's the same. It's Boston. And it's not a subject of... Okay, let me redo this. Because that one was part of this. So I'll start again underneath that. We're at the time of the end at the Sunday law. It's Boston, and the characteristic of Boston is an unsealing. It can't be an unsealing of gender equality because that happened 13 years ago. So it's an unsealing of something. And it can't be gender equality because you've already been tested on that. Has to be something different. Then you're going to go Concord, Exeter. And then you'll get a shut door. Test. And the question is, you're going to be tested on this. And the this is this question mark. And then what you can do, which we didn't, is go to the next dispensation, the harvest, and do exactly the same thing. So, if this is correct, I'll say we collectively, we're open to being corrected, that maybe we've made a mistake. But if we're correct, Shemaine and Jonathan, then what this seems to be indicating is that, I guess this is a redundant phrase, that the test is at the end of a dispensation. And if it's correct, in the dispensation of the former reign, that the message of gender equality was unsealed at the beginning, then the testing of that information must happen at the end, at the shut door, the Sunday law. And Elder Tess has said that gender equality is the great test. So the great test appears to be happening at the Sunday law. Then if you get that repeating pattern and do it all over again, you see it here. Then you take all the same terms. I've copied everything from these two. Brought them down. And the only thing that's missing is this question mark. What message is unsealed or being given at the Sunday law? So it may seem redundant, but it appears to be the message that these 5 speakers are giving. Now, we have said, maybe they have said, I think at least some of them have. They'll correct me if they haven't. I'm pretty sure that I have. And that you have. That the 5 speakers are giving the Sunday law message. Have I said something along those lines? I think I have. I don't know if they have. If they would classify what they're teaching as this statement. They may have some additional thoughts or ideas, like, especially like Eleanor has. We know that. So the question is this correct? Are they giving a message about the Sunday law? Now, they're certainly talking about events at the Sunday law. You can see that. They're all giving this message, and it's the Sunday law period in which they're doing it. Now, what I think the confusion may be is that when they're giving this message at the Sunday law, we, at least some of us, assume they're giving us the message about the Sunday law. And if I were to ask you, as an amateur, if someone was giving you a message about the Sunday law, do you think they'd be speaking about the great test? I think most of us would say yes. So maybe there's an assumption on our part that when we say they're giving a message at the Sunday law, we read that to mean they're giving the Sunday law message. A message about the Sunday law. And what that means is they're giving a message about the great test. So, you're probably going to need to listen back to that and write what I said. To grasp the implications of that. So, are the speakers giving the message about the Sunday law? We could say yes. Are they giving a message at the Sunday law? We can say definitely yes. And then the third part of that question is, are they giving a message about the great test? So, are they giving a message? Are they giving the Sunday law message? It's a question mark. I'm going to say yes. Then I'm going to put at the Sunday law. Yes. About the Sunday law. I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to do a smaller yes. Let me say half. And then, about the great test. And I think this third one is perhaps something that's confused us. I'm reticent to say confuse them because I don't want to speak on their behalf. So based upon what Jonathan laid out, I'm going to say no. They're not speaking about the great test. Their Sunday law message is about something different. And maybe this is what's confused us. So this is a suggestion. We began with the unsealing of 5 presentations. So read that as a sentence. At the Sunday law, there's an unsealing of 5 presentations on elections, or what we could call the Sunday law. So instead of phrasing it that way, another suggestion was something that was more succinct: the 7th kingdom. So at the Sunday law, there's an unsealing, which would mean there's a new message about the 7th kingdom. And then, at the close of probation, the shut door, you're going to be tested on the 7th kingdom. Now, I don't like focusing on individual speakers because it's easy to misrepresent them. And I'm not saying what's on this board, what's in this study is correct. So I want to use this as a point that we can discuss these subjects around. If this is correct, then we have 2 tests. One at the Sunday law and one at the close of probation. And if I were to do this, Exeter to the shut door is a test. Exeter to the shut door is a test. Remember, this is what Elder Tabo had written. Then, if someone says the test is at the Sunday law, and someone else says the test is at the formalization or Exeter, and you say one of them's teaching error, maybe with this explanation you can see that they both have a valid point. So if this is correct, then we've been tested on the subject of gender equality, and now we need to understand the 7th kingdom. The way this graphic is done with the words that have been chosen, we're not being tested on gender equality now. We're being tested on our understanding of the 7th kingdom. And the subject of the 7th kingdom is the beast and the woman. It's the subject that all 5 speakers are concerned about with respect to the US elections. Because they all discuss, and I assume they all agree, that this current administration is the seventh kingdom or is becoming the seventh kingdom, depending on how they view things. So, to say it succinctly, all five speakers are talking about the seventh kingdom. And I think, as Douglas mentioned before, it just so happens they're all speaking about it when the Sunday law happened. And if this is correct, it's actually what you should expect, that there would be an unsealing of a new message at the Sunday law. At this level, that message has nothing to do with gender equality. It's about, if we call it, the creation and the rise of the seventh kingdom. And what we would call the latter rain, or the Sunday law history, is really the story about the seventh kingdom. What it does, how it rises to power. And then, at some time in the future, we will be tested on this subject. And then you should expect Boston, Concord, Exeter test in the history of the harvest. So, at the close of probation, there will be an unsealing of a message that you'll be tested upon. I'm going to say it this way, between Exeter and the shut door. And this is me. This message is not about the second advent. I'll just say, I don't think. It's something else. Maybe you could have a think about that. So, if I redraw this, hopefully more simply, there is an unsealing and a test, an unsealing and a test. I won't repeat the pattern. Sunday law close of probation. This is, we'll just put radical feminism. This is the seventh kingdom. Two separate subjects. This one, radical feminism, is the great test. The great test for us happens at the Sunday law. And at that very moment, there's an unsealing of the message of the seventh kingdom, which you'll be tested upon at the close of probation. And there's going to be another cycle after that. So I'm just going to. Have we run out of time, or have we got 2 minutes? So I want to suggest the following. This is just me. What we call the great test, radical feminism, is personal, and I'll call it internal. I'm using the word internal not necessarily with respect to the movement. It's you, the personal. How you relate to gender equality or radical feminism. When it comes to this dispensation, which is the Sunday law dispensation, the story now, or the framework, is not personal, it's political. And we need to understand the rise of the seventh kingdom. We don't need to understand its fall in the next dispensation, I don't think. So we'll call this external. And to tie the two dispensations together, what we need to understand about the seventh kingdom is how this system, we'll call it this government, handles the subject of equality. Having understood it for ourselves, we should now be equipped to be observers of how this government manages the subject of equality. And that's how you get this, the subject of equality passing through these two dispensations. You need to understand who the seventh kingdom is, how it was created, how it came to power, and then how it manages equality. And why would you want to do that? Because in the next dispensation, there'll be unsealing and test about some subject, and what I'm suggesting this is, it's a kingdom, not the seventh kingdom, not this political party, these earthly governments. It's not about how they manage the subject of equality. But it's an understanding of how you will manage a government. Or a kingdom. You'll be tested upon it at the second advent. And this story then is about how the kingdom or the government of heaven would operate. And you should have learnt how to run a government by the previous two dispensations. Self-management, in the preparation, what we would call the great test, and then how a government manages that subject or fails, and then how you would do it. So we didn't have time for more questions. We've managed one. Let's pray. Holy God, we thank you. I thank you for the privilege of camp meetings, the opportunity to come together and to be able to be free to share thoughts and ideas. Mind working with mind. We offer before you, I offer before the movement, these thoughts, these suggestions that are the fruit of a group conversation that we had. Lord, I ask that you would give the members wisdom and understanding to be able to look into these things, hold fast to that which is true, and lay aside that which is not. In Jesus' name, amen.